Okay guys, so in this video we are going to look at listing some channels, so let's get into it. So here we see that we now have this general channel here, and if I click my channels element here, I'm going to be presented with this pop-up where I have one channel to select from. I can click it and hey, magically I'll just click it like that, and you see that I actually get redirected to this specific channel by just clicking that. And I can type some stuff to the channel and great stuff like that, right? And if I search, I can search on channels and so forth. And that's about all the magic that we're going to cover in this video. We're going to look at create channels and stuff like that a little bit later. So one thing we also needed to support, if I just log out here and let's actually go and drop all the users and drop all the channels so that we have a clear state in our database, and we are going to go and register. We are also going to support actually having a default. So here we can see that the general channel actually gets created for us when we actually create a user. We'll kind of look at that as well, because if the database state is completely clear and there are no channels, there should at least be a general channel, like a first initial channel. That seems to be fairly, I hope that makes sense to you. So let's go through the code. So first and foremost, I've reshuffled a few things in our services now because, as we can see here, the channel service here has been moved and it's up here now instead, and the reason for that is because the user service now requires the channel service as a dependency, and we'll look at that in just a moment as to why that actually is. And the channel service has gotten a new function called get public channels, and all it's going to do is that it's going to get, well, technically we don't have the concept of private and public as of right now, but basically this is right now just an abstraction that represents, hey, get all the channels that a user should be able to see in the modal, and that's really it. Let's have a look at the user service. So we now take in, as we see here, the channel service as a dependency. And the reason why we want to do that is because we've updated our register user function. So basically what we're going to do is that we're going to create a new user, or rather when we create a new user, we're simply going to get the count of the amount of users in the database. And if there's exactly one, in other words, we have created one new user, then we will simply use the channel service to create, well, basically the general channel and put that user in that channel. This is a little bit, in a real scenario, we would probably have something along the lines, okay, you're going to create a channel group, a actual workspace or something like that. That's where, like, how Slack actually works in like the real application. But since we don't have the concept of a workspace as of now, there's no reason for us to implement that. So this is fine for now. And then our alert has gotten a little bit of an update, and the reason for that, basically, so we used to pass both the title and the component as part of dispatching to basically the action that sets the internal component for our alert used to have a title and a component, but right now it's just going to have a component, and I'll touch on that in just a moment as to why that is. So basically now we don't have the concept of a component. It's just the value itself is actually going to be the entire component instead of being a wrapper object with that stuff inside. So, and then we have some CSS updates, nothing super interesting there. And some boilerplate, a few new actions so we can filter on channels as well as filter on direct messages. And our events have been updated as well, so we have one more event. And here is kind of where this comes in. So we now have this new concept of an alert channel list. Just as we have one for direct messages, we are going to have one for the actual channels. And as we've seen before, so the modal, everything around, like the escape button and the white area and all of that stuff, that is the alert itself. However, the content area, this list here and this section here, that's the thing that is the alert channel itself. And as you can see here, if we look at the markup, you'll see now that I've actually moved the header into the like the content component. This used to be as in the alert itself, but now that we have two different variations of headers, we need to put that inside of the content area, because this modal and this modal, as you can see, like there's no button here. And we could have had the approach of, all right, we will have like some type of Boolean value or something saying that should have button, should not have button, header with button, header without button. And in my experience, that just gets really messy really quickly. So I just moved all of the stuff that is going to be specific to each component inside of this content component instead, so that I can keep the alert as generic as possible. And yeah, that's about it really. And then we have the same sort of functions as you could expect. This entire thing is extremely close to the direct messages list that we've seen before, the alert direct messages list. So we have like renders, filters, all that good stuff. And then we have this thing here, open channel, which is pretty much the same thing as like it's hopefully very straightforward. We're going to pass in the channel ID, we're going to close the alert, and then we're going to redirect the user to that URL. And when there's an event, hey, we're going to just look at if the type is of filter channels, and then we're going to filter the channels exactly as we've done in the past. And here is our render, and yeah, that's really all there is to it. There's not much, well, much more to it. Same thing goes for the channel, the channel item here. I can even see that I haven't even renamed this. This shouldn't be that. It should be channel list item, and we shouldn't import it as that. Yeah, okay, cool. So now it's renamed and all good. Anywho, this structure is, as you've seen in the previous component, pretty much the same. There's very few differences. Most of this is copy paste, and then of course modifying it so that it actually has the things that are specific. And then we have this little section here. We've updated our alert direct messages list. So we can see here that I've removed some dependencies, and basically all that's changed here, as I touched on earlier, this header was part of the alert, but it's now actually part of the content that goes into the alert. All right, and here we have a little bit of an update, well, quite a few updates actually. As we can see here, like the main thing that's changed here is that, all right, we don't have a title anymore, and we can see here that it used to be the case that when we dispatch the show alert action, we used to wrap that in an object with a title and like the actual created element as the component, but now we're simply sending the created element directly. And then we've of course also updated this on-click listener that we had for creating the channels button. So instead of showing the modal, it's actually going to do a little bit of logic. We can actually go a little bit deeper into that one and have a look here. So we can see here that we have this new, well, we're going to get all the channels from the network, and then we're going to map them over, put them into our client model so that, you know, we have a model that is deterministic. We're going to create a new alert channels list, and we're going to do this slightly dangerous global mutation, but I think that it's we could probably make this a little bit nicer, but for now this is, you know, the size of this application is not going to be all that big, so I still don't think that this is going to be a problem. It is a potential problem if a very specific thing starts to happen, and that is basically that somewhere else in our application it becomes very important that this exact reference is going to stay the same. So in other words, if you overwrite this value and somebody else is depending on that value staying the same, well, that might be a little bit dangerous, but we're not going to have that issue as far as I can foresee right now. And then we dispatch the show alert just as up here. Cool, so then we've had a few changes in the channels list. This is a little bit of refactoring. So we updated the events that are going to, well, basically just go through the types and set all of these, set all the states. And the reason why we did this update is because we want to get to this point down here, which is the interesting part, where basically now when we set the channels, in other words, we just make the network call, we are going to grab all of the child nodes of the list, and we're going to just remove them. And then we're going to go through all the channels, and we're going to filter out everything that has the type of channel so that we only grab that. And then we're simply going to recreate this entire, this list with these new channels, so that we simply render the correct thing to, to our section here. Because the thing is, we don't want don't want general to appear here under direct messages. That wouldn't make any sense for us. Like, we want general to stay up here, and we want direct messages to be down here. So that's why this component is going to simply filter out all the channels, or everything that is of type channel, so we make that distinction. And if we look at direct messages list, that component it already had a lot of this boilerplate code, so it does the exact same thing. It's just going to filter through, grab everything that is of type direct message, and append that instead. So it's going to clear everything, and then it's going to re-render everything, and it's just going to be the stuff that has the type of direct messages. And we added a new exciting color and a new endpoint to get all of our, getting all of the channels. And then we have this endpoint that simply, it's just going to grab all of the channels. And as we saw earlier, this is where we get public channels. And for now, that's just going to be good enough, even though technically all we're doing is getting all of the channels that have the type of channel, instead of getting direct messages and stuff like that. And yeah, that is about it. So we can call this pretty much done now. And next up, we're going to have a look at creating new channels. So let's see what happens then.